Welcome, everybody. My name is Roger Durling, the Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. And today with us, we have Director Joe Mantello and producer and writer Ned Martel and their film, The Boys in the Band. IndieWire wrote, the result of this movie is a sophisticated Tark-Tongue revival and a gayed-up Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf that surmounts the challenges faced by stage-to-screen adaptations, specifically the utter confinement to a single space. And this is not the only rave review. There has been all across the board rave reviews about this incredible adaptation. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for being here. And I'm going to start right away and ask you about the fact that this play was done on Broadway. I mean, not on Broadway. It was already originally done 50 years ago. And there was a screen adaptation that captured the entire cast, which is something that is rarely happens. And then 50 years later, you had a revival on Broadway, which won the Tony for Best Revival. And then you guys were able to bring back the entire cast. How does that feel like, you guys, that you have this, I mean, has this ever happened in history that two back-to-back productions contain the same cast? And how does it feel like to you guys?
Well, thanks for having us, Roger. If Mark Crowley, who I know Joe and I wish were here to meet you and for your audience to hear from, he insisted that that was the first time. Now, I don't have the encyclopedic knowledge that he'd had of American theater, but it was a lot of moving parts, and you need an impresario producer like Ryan Murphy to have assembled these 9 men and all their conflicting schedules 1 year after they won after they were on stage with the revival, just after they won the Tony. And you needed his Netflix deal to invest in this, pretty small gay play and turn it into something that could be seen on a digital platform, which is itself a never before event in American culture, I think.
Mm-hmm. Joe, and also to Ned, when this was done 50 years ago, including, the play and the movie, there were things specifically in the movie that you were not, that maybe you couldn't do, or you couldn't show on screen or deal with. Did you guys find that aspect liberating or a hindrance?
I mean, I think we found it liberating, and I also think we felt a responsibility to bring something new to it after, looking at it through the lens of having 50 years having passed, that this group of people approaching this material, and we were essentially working from Mart's original screenplay as a template. So both films, as a starting point, use some version of the same material. And, obviously we modified it, we added things, we edited certain things. But of course, the question that we always asked ourselves is, what can we add now that couldn't have been done in 1969? And it led us to some, interesting creative choices, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Ned, the adaptation, you're the one that put the script together. Tell us about working with Matt, and what was it like? I did notice that there were things that you open up, the opening montage. There were sequences that are new to us. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. Mark Crowley is one of those people you'd kind of want to spend the whole day listening to, and that was the benefit of what I got to do. We had these long phone conversations that plumbed the depths of the men who inspired these characters. Many of them are based, if not explicitly, then tangentially, on people he knew or experiences he had. And we went through every aspect of some pretty difficult interactions and relationships. And then Joe and I thought about how that might change the way each character is presented in the beginning, how they are left in a little coda that he created. And then also, we thought one of the things that you're allowed to do in 2020 that you couldn't do in 1968 is to show homoeroticism. That really, not only was it not available through censorship, but it was just a cultural taboo that would cost you a lot at the box office in the coverage. It was a real risk. And Mart was constantly wide-eyed about how much we could do now that we couldn't do back then. So that was there were the two main things I was thinking about: the biographies of each of those people and the elements of human connection that are still pretty radical to show in cinema in America today. Yeah. But I think when you have a group of gay men actors, all 9 of the ensemble are gay men, and the director and producer and the writers are all gay men, you get a kind of connection just in your everyday interactions that turns into something special that the cameras very clearly picked up.
Mm-hmm. Joe, I want to follow up on something that Ned mentioned, that you had, it was the first time that I think that the play was done with an all gay cast. The original production did not have, in the movie, there are actors that are not all gay, correct? And what, is that something that you strive for when you were casting the original play? And of course it became the same cast, or you were open to have straight actors?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot has been made about it being an all-gay cast, and I think that's important, and I think it should be acknowledged, and I think it should be celebrated. But at the same time, I also feel like it's important to say that every single one of these people was cast purely on the merits of their abilities and what they bring to the role. So that the primary reason that they were cast was not because they were an out gay actor, but because they were an exceptionally wonderful actor. The byproduct of it being an all gay cast is enormous, and obviously it has a great impact on the way that we approach the material, mostly in the way that we rehearsed it, in the sense that, there were just things that were second nature. There were things that didn't need to be explained. There were things that they just intuitively understood about the characters and the relationship. So I'm glad it worked out that way, but it was not intentional.
Mm-hmm. And Joe, it is a highly cinematic film, what you've done, the adaptation. But you had originally done it on Broadway and staged it. And it is, I mean, to me, it feels like two different animals. How did you have to work out? Can you walk us through the process of that you were visually thinking and working on it as a play, and then all of a sudden you have to shift and think cinematically?
Yeah. Well, they were very two distinctly different projects in terms of the way they look and the way they feel, and just the design approach. What we tried to do in the Broadway revival was to set it it was definitely set in 1968, but we tried to give it sort of a more timeless or a classic look, that the set was slightly abstracted. It was never meant to, reek of naturalism. And what I really wanted to do was to focus on those actors and those relationships, because in the past, when I'd seen productions, they leaned pretty heavily into the period, like really heavily. And it had the effect on, at least on me, of really distancing me from the material. So our approach was to try to have a foot firmly planted in the past and firmly planted in the present. And as we approach the film, obviously you have a whole different set of expectations and challenges, and so we took a more natural approach to the production design, that it was very detailed, that it was clearly set in 1968, and that had its benefits as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I remember that the set on on Broadway was all there were mirrors, and there was it
Monochrome.
was monochrome, you
Yeah.
know, lots of red.
Yeah.
And then here, how did the apartment becomes another character in the film? You know, you have the upstairs, you have the terrace, you have the living room. How did the design come about that becomes very, I know, as I said, it becomes another character in the production?
Well, not only did you have all of those things, but you actually had the floor below Michael's apartment with other apartments there. So essentially, we were creating just a small cutout of an apartment building. Um, Judy Becker, our production designer, based the look of the apartment on, I believe she had a relative who lived at the top floor of a brownstone, and that I think she was saying that and that top floor was a ballroom or some sort of grand, there was a kind of a grand space, and it had moldings and everything. And she was thinking that at the time, this is when they were really carving up New York apartments. And so that she wanted to have the distinction between the original space and the kind of more jerry-rigged new apartment. And so you kind of see the juxtaposition of the old and the new in certain shots. And that was really our first approach, her first approach to it. It was based on a space that she knew. I believe it was her aunt.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mart actually was a very crafty recreator of rental spaces too. And he made for himself a penthouse on the Upper East Side just by his ingenuity and maybe a couple bribes to his super. And that has become one of the primo penthouses that I think one of the theater mavens of now lives in. But I think they both, Mart had a long history with converting places like that, and Judy looked into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was fat. I mean, I mentioned I've seen it a couple of times, but I was really enthralled by the design. I mean, details like I noticed the black marble mantelpiece.
That's real Italian antique.
And there is this moldings on the floor. I mean, the apartment feels like there is a slight decay to it that that is sort of, it had this old grandeur that is sort of slightly falling apart. Is that something I'm reading too much into it?
No, absolutely. I mean, the details are, are just exquisite what she did. In that marble fireplace that you're describing, she just had determined that that's where Michael's TV is. So that he's not lighting fires, but that he needs somewhere to put his TV. And you see all of these shopping bags and boxes. And even, I have to say that even if you went into his bedroom in the closets, every item of clothing in there was specifically chosen as something that this character would have. She wasn't just filling it up with, just any old shirt and everything. So it was that detailed.
And her set decorator, Gene Sardina, they did the same attention to the kitchen and the bar and the medicine cabinet. There's really no detail unspared. And I also want to point out the ingenuity that Joe and Judy mastered about the kind of breezeway that connects the kitchen to the terrace. So you could see these characters moving. It's almost like noises off, like they're going in so many different directions, 9 people in a confined space. And it adds a dynamism that I think you really feel on the screen.
Correct. And talk to us about working with your cinematographer, Bill Pope, that I was mentioned earlier to Ned before you came in, the fact that you're able to capture nuances. There is a reputation to the script about the bitchiness of the characters, but what is noticeable now in this production, in the film, that the affection between the characters that is captured by the camera work. Can you talk to us about that, both of you?
You go, Joe, for sure.
Well, I mean, just to address the second part of it is that I'm glad that you see a kind of affection and tenderness about them, and I think you're looking at a group of actors where that is a very real dynamic that exists between them, and you know they're also 50 something years removed from this play, so there's no way that they could kind of perfectly inhabit the experience of the original actors who, you know, took on these roles that could have been career killers. And I think you feel that as brilliant as they all are, and I think they're really an extraordinary ensemble in that original film, you do feel a kind of, there's a spikiness to it that is really potent and powerful. Mm-hmm. But that's not where this group of actors live. And so I think just instinctively they just brought something else to it that, without softening it, just added a different kind of nuance to it. And you're right, I mean, but some of it is just the work of Adrian Brazil, our editor, who had an incredible sensitivity in terms of finding those reactions. Obviously they existed, but he had this unerring ability to just to know when to cut to the right person.
But what, you know, maybe, you know, I'm not well versed in acting, but there was a lot going on in the characters' minds that it's captured in the reaction shots. Is that something, Ned, that you guys worked out with the actors, where it was scripted, that we're gonna cut to you, you're not saying any words, but there is something going on internally? I mean, do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
I do. The words that Mark put down in the first place have that power. People know that the words are injurious and they're going to right away produce a reaction. And on stage, in the version that you saw, the whole audience could, you know, pick an actor to look at as this was happening. All the reactions were there for everyone to see. So how do you choose this time? Well, one thing that Ryan did give Joe and the actors is a week together, you know, a year after they had been on stage, to rehearse. And they knew their lines. It wasn't about that. But in that space, they could start to see that it's time to go deeper. It's time to explore these roles in new ways. And none of them settled for what they had already done. They all looked for ways to add that depth and to showcase those connections among them, which make it so unique. And I think they wholly reinvent 9 performances that won the Tony and put it in a new context. It's very clear to me.
Mm-hmm. Roger, I think in terms of what you're asking about is, you know, what you had was this group of 9 actors who had galvanized into this incredible ensemble. And certainly in the last third of the film, where they're playing the game of telephone, there were days, sometimes several days, where a character like the character that Matt Bomer played had absolutely no dialogue. And he was an observer in those scenes. And what you had, and you felt it on the set, is every single one of those 9 actors, whether they were actively, whether they had dialogue or whether they didn't, they were working as hard in the other person's close-up as they would be in their own. They never, ever, ever, there was never a moment where they said, oh, the camera's on Jim, you know, I'm going to phone it in. And so I think hopefully what that allows you to capture is that though the camera is on Jim and he's looking in Matt Bomer's eyes, he's not getting, a kind of a dial tone. He's actually getting something. And so the set was electric in that way, and that they were all working towards a common goal. And perhaps that's what you're talking about, that as we made those choices in the editing room, it was potent because there was never a moment where they phoned it in.
But did you discuss with them, not just the person that was speaking, but the others that are just participating by reacting, did you discuss with them their through line, what, or that was their creation?
No, there was absolutely no need to. I mean, they played it for pretty successfully for 3 months on Broadway, so they had a kind of an idea of the emotional landscape of the piece, and they all understood that. So no, and also what you were seeing is in this version, sometimes the actor, in the play version, it was blocked sometimes where maybe someone was standing behind Robin DeJesus when he made his phone call, so they never actually got to see his face. And in the film version, they were looking right at him. And so new things were happening, and it was like I said, it was electric because of that.
Mm-hmm. I actually wish that Bill Pope was with us. But I'm pretty sure the two of you can answer this question. Visually, the movie, sometimes it becomes claustrophobic. It's a lot of tight shots, and with the camera work, the mood of each scene changes. Can you talk about that, Joe?
Yeah. I mean, we did talk specifically about kind of capturing the swirl and the headiness of the party when it was getting started, and to kind of capture the kind of liberation. So you'll notice, I think, in the beginning, there's a lot of steady cam shots where one character will take you to another one, and we wanted to capture that swirl because we knew, just working backwards from the last third of the film, once those doors shut, when the storm happens, that we were going to have to shoot it in a very, very particular way. We had to obviously capture the person who had the aria, but also we had to have coverage for 9 people. And how we were going to do that in a way that was thorough and smart and efficient in terms of time. And so what you start to see,
I'm sorry to interrupt, Joe, but you did 8 pages of dialogue a day. Like, this is breakneck pace for something that delivers that kind of emotional impact. It's amazing.
Yeah, and so that I think what happens in the last third is that in terms of the coverage, you'll see there'll be more people in the frame than you would see at the beginning of the party, and so we try to capture pairings of people, or you're absolutely right. The style of shooting evolves as it goes on.
Mm-hmm. And then you guys use this green screen. Am I correct? The outside the terrace is, and how how was it challenging to add that element? What did the actors had difficulty adjusting to having to play to a green screen?
I think we all got used to it. There were times where we had a translite, which was the cityscape was behind them, and sometimes it was a green screen. I mean, for me, as somebody who is relatively new to this process, I just thought, this is mad. What is this going to look like? But the visual effects team did an extraordinary job. I hope it looks like we shot on location.
Mm-hmm. No, it looks terrific. It wasn't until afterwards that I found out that it was green screen. It looks pretty natural.
Yeah.
And it moves day to night too, so it was pretty complex for the lighting team.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I love about the film, is that it starts during the day, and it's this sort of long day's journey into night,
Drinking.
Yeah, and drinking. Yeah. The music and the sound. Can you talk about the fact that there is this long passages in which there is no music, and in particular, I noticed it during the the present opening sequence, where what you hear, and it's very lyrical, you hear the sounds of the street, you hear car sounds, et cetera, et cetera. Can you talk to us about the sound design?
Yeah, well, I don't think we knew initially, or I don't think we thought initially that we wouldn't have a score. It's just something that emerged in seeing it as it all came together and was assembled. What I started to realize is that Mart's writing and the rhythm of Mart's writing is the music, and that you didn't need anything to assist it, or to provide a kind of a counterpoint, but that to trust that the rhythm of of the dialogue was actually the thing that is going to feel musical. But I think we arrived at that in the editing process. I think there were a few scenes where we added some temp underscoring, but we pulled it out because it just felt like a hat on a hat. It didn't feel like there was no purpose to it, and it felt like we didn't have the courage of our convictions, and that we should just trust what it was.
There were two things that I liked about that choice, and one of them, and as I said, I'm going back to Harold's present opening sequence. It added a sense of suspense, like
Sure.
that you're waiting for something to happen because of the quietness. And as I said, also there was this lyrical aspect of the city, that seeped in,
I love silence. I love silence on stage. I think Ned and I were both pretty clear that we wanted the film to start in silence and then kick in hard when that album came on. There's something about silence that I think draws an audience in or makes them sit forward. You're not doing their work for them. You're saying there's an invitation sometimes in silence that I think that is really effective, and I'm surprised that people don't use it more. It's just a taste thing. I really like it.
Ned, the song choices, is that something that was in Mart's script, or is that something that you guys worked on?
We are working it together, but I have to tell you, Mart had impeccable musical taste, and he could summon up any number of chanteuses or Broadway soundtracks and insist that they belonged in that room. And the prop stylist came up with an entire record collection for Michael to have, and the actors loved it. They were always flipping through it. And I actually have the June Christie albums that the prop stylist found, and Chris Connor, and he always said that those characters would definitely be listening to West Side.
Not West Side Story, but West Side.
West Side.
Yeah, that's the lingo, right?
Yeah.
And but in the end, Joe had often said, musical cues tell the audience exactly how to feel, and we didn't need that per se. And then when we're anchoring things in 1968, as opposed to any other time on the calendar, what better than to use music from then? And Irma Franklin is the one that Joe chose from the beginning. She was new to me. She's Aretha Franklin's older sister, and her rendition of that Sam and Dave song is so original and propulsive, heading you toward a party. And then in the end, I believe it was Adrian who found the Chet Baker, right, Joe? And once Joe had gotten used to it, and then Ryan, when he heard it for the first time, he said it has to be that. And yet we kept looking. We looked for other ideas. Should it have lyrics? Should it be instrumental that's composed? We entertained many options, but that turned out to be the one that ended the film in the right note.
Well, I'm going to embarrass myself by saying this, but I'm going to. The guy's in love with you. I actually, every time I watch the film, I sing out loud. It's a good thing. It's a
Yeah.
good thing that we're watching it on Netflix because in the private of my own home, I sing it out loud, and it's a powerful moment. I just love.
And that's when Alan views these men dancing, and you know they're expressing who they are for the first time, and he is confronted by it. It's very powerful, and I mean we're
Yeah,
back right
and
on.
that's when the storm starts rolling in as well. So both Joe and Ned, I mean, you guys did this on Broadway, and then you had a time out, and the actors did as well. What did you guys learn? What has shifted from having done it for a long time on Broadway and being with it, and then all of a sudden picked it up all over again? What?
Well, I think one of the things that we learned playing it for 3 months on Broadway was that some of the baggage that's accompanied piece over the years was mitigated by the way that this group of actors approached it. And I don't want to say that it wasn't serious on Broadway, it certainly was, but it was also incredibly raucous in a way that you thought like, well, what play am I at here? This can't possibly be Boys in the Band. And so I think we just kind of built on that sense of, I don't even know, what would you call it, Ned, like at the beginning, that it was maybe like there was a lighter touch to the beginning, maybe, because.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
You know, we did think hard about 1968, not as the year of upheaval that it was, but the hostility outside of the party for these men. And you know, when you're watching it on Broadway and people are laughing in the audience, and it's there's Sheldon, and you know, the party is kind of a happy place. We wanted to emphasize in the cinema that, you know, there are ways that these men are regarded in their habitat, in the places they live, in the city they've chosen, that are hostile. And that makes their refuge among each other more poignant, more intense in so many ways. So that's one thing that I wouldn't say we mitigated it and made it less fun, but it was an element of complexity that the film allowed us to try.
Mm-hmm. And the actors, Joe, um, did you notice a shift from that pause that they had where they were not inhabiting this characters, and then all of a sudden a few, you know, a time lapse later, they have to revisit the same characters. Did you notice a difference?
I did notice a difference, and it's hard to talk about because I think there was no deficiency in what they did on stage. They were all extraordinary on stage, but something happens, and I've seen this happen before with actors when they have a little hiatus between and they have some time away. Something happens where the material becomes more organic, there's less effort involved, they trust it a little bit more because it's been rattling around in their unconscious for months. And they also know that they're coming to this, they knew that they were coming to this leg of the journey with the kind of a strong foundation of having played it. So the landscape was pretty familiar to them. And so there was an ability to play and experiment because the kind of the melody of what they were doing was pretty strong.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of the actors who played Larry and Hank, they got to know each other much better than in the beginning of the play. They're in a relationship now.
Yep. And so I'm going to put you on the spot, Ned. Which is the one character of the ones at the party that you most relate to?
Oh, you know, when I started, I think maybe 10 years ago, I'd said to Ryan that I thought that I was like Donald, because I have way too many books. If you can see it beyond this, I just have stacks of books, read and unread. And I put him as my Instagram. This is very flattering, self-flattering to choose Frederick Combs as my Instagram handle. And Ryan was like, hold on a second. And after living with these characters, I see I'm much more of a Michael. Irish Catholic heritage and, you know, capable of peacocking. So I'd have to put myself in that category.
And what about you, Joe? Which is the character that spoke to you the most?
Let's see. I'm probably a herald with a Bernard Rising.
Well, I'm Michael because I'm obsessed with even now I'm looking at like my hair is receding.
Roger, you're perfect.
No, I'm not.
I'm a paper one day about the number of times Michael looks in a mirror in this film. There's quite a few times.
When I introduced you, Joe, I just mentioned that you were the director on Broadway of this and the film. But for those who are listening to us, this is one of the greatest theater directors in history. This is the man responsible for Wicked on Broadway, Take Me Out, one of the greatest productions of Edward Albee's Three Tall Women, the definitive production. You're a genius in theater, Joe. But the question that I want to ask you after I'm done embarrassing you is the fact that you have performed or been involved in three of the most iconic gay plays in history. Angels in America, you were in the original cast and you were brilliant in it. Then you've done The Normal Heart. And now, you know, Boys in the Band. How does that, can you tell us your impression of having worked in these three iconic works?
Boy, it makes it seem like it was intentional. And I would also, if I may, because he's a very important part of my life, I would also include Terrence McNally's Love, Valor.
Oh, Love, Valor, and Compassion. Yes, yes. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No. I just, you know, I don't know. Honestly, I'm a person who makes choices, creative choices that are purely instinctual. What does it feel like? I don't know. I hear you talking about it, and I hear you putting it into a larger context, and I have to acknowledge that that is true, but at the time they just felt like deeply, deeply compelling projects that I wanted to invest in. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Can I paraphrase something that Joe taught me? These are Joe's words that I'm putting back together. So when you have a work like Boys in the Band that's 52 years old, the story is so strong that it can withstand the changes that you put it through. The pieces are literary and complex and human, that you have the power and the responsibility to reshape it. But as actors and writers and directors and anybody involved, it can reshape you. Like it is, mm-hmm. It's definitely a give and take. And I think only the strongest plays allow that.
Mm-hmm. I'm also thinking about all the young gay men that have been influenced and inspired by this, by this work, as well as Angels and Normal Heart. So many people that have been, that see themselves, you know, for the first time on the Broadway stage and see, hey, that's me. And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, in the case of something like The Normal Heart on stage and in Ryan's film of it, I mean, I think that there was a whole generation. It's kind of hard to imagine. It's hard for, you know, that I know there were young men and women who came to see the play. And whereas for my generation, or those of us who lived through it, that play is like a dispatch from the front lines of a war. But these young people were coming to it as a piece of history, and a piece of history that somehow there'd been a kind of amnesia about. And so there were scenes in the play where the character of Felix says, "Can we kiss?" And the doctor says, "I don't know." "Can we do this?" "I don't know." And it was in real time. When I saw that play, that information was in real time. But this whole generation of younger people came to it, and I think their minds were blown that there was a time in our history where we did not have that kind of information. And it gives them a kind of frame of reference, is the only way that I can, and a kind of an understanding of history and the things that we've inherited. And so in that sense, it's really powerful when you walk out the stage door and you have these one-on-one encounters with audience members, younger audience members in particular.
Yeah, and now we have the boys in the band that young people can also look up to and be moved by it.
It might be worth noting too, Roger, that several of us worked on Brian's adaptation of The Normal Heart for HBO. Joe's Emmy nominated, as was Jim and Matt. And I was a newbie to this world. I was a journalist for 25 years before I did this. And I thought, whoa, this is amazing. Let's do another one of these. Like, these opportunities don't come up very often. They're really special works. And it takes an intensely committed team and sponsor like Netflix to really invest in it. So we all left that experience wondering, will we ever feel like that again? And I have to say, in Boys in the Band, we got to feel it again, which is unbelievable to me.
That's terrific. Well, guys, I could go on talking to you forever, but you know, we have to wrap it up, and I'm deeply honored to have spent time with you. Thank you so much for being with us,
Roger.
And congratulations on the fantastic work. So
it's really nice to hear. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So thank you very much. See you soon.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.